Hey everyone, I'm Andy Petronic, and this is the Whole Life Challenge podcast. It's the place we connect with extraordinary people, ones who think differently, who have risen to the top of their field, who have vast knowledge, experience, and insights to share, as well as incredible stories to tell. They are also the ones who have figured out a way to take their life's experience and turn it into something that truly makes a difference in the world for others. These are their stories. Hey everyone, it's Andy Petronic, and I'm back with another episode of the Whole Life Podcast. This is episode number 127. I'm talking with Stephen Sashen today. But before I tell you a little bit more about the episode, I want to tell you some big news. In case you haven't heard, I've got a new website. It's andypetronic.com. And it's just a place for me to kind of collect the things I'm working on and doing. And one of those things is a monthly newsletter. And you can subscribe right on the homepage at andypetronic.com. The idea for the newsletter came about. I really tried to do the newsletter as part of the podcast, as the introduction to the podcast, kind of giving people in the podcast an update on what's happening in my life, things I'm experimenting with, playing with, doing, learning, especially from all these incredible people that I get to be around because of the podcast and because of the Whole Life Challenge. And it really didn't fit there with the podcast. It was always disjointed. I mean, if I go back and listen to those old episodes, I always feel like, gosh, the first 10 minutes are a different podcast almost than the remainder of the podcast. And so that's really what I'm doing in the newsletter. It's a short, pithy, bulleted, long bullets, because I put some description in each thing about things I'm learning, people I'm learning from, videos I'm watching, movies I'm seeing, new concepts I've been introduced to. And it's meant to be a supportive addition to your life, not an overwhelming additional piece of email that you get, which is one of the reasons I'm only doing it once a month right now. So you can subscribe to it there. One more piece of news. The podcast is now available on Spotify. I mean, people, that's big time. I don't know if it's big time or not, but it's there. So if you're on Spotify and you want to listen to the podcast, you can find it there. You can't write a review there, and you have to go to iTunes still to write a review. So whether you're on Overcast or one of the other players or not, you've got to go to iTunes to leave a review. And please do that, by the way. Helps me out a lot. Helps the podcast out a lot. Helps other people get to know that this podcast exists a lot. So this episode, in case you haven't heard this either, is brought to you by The Good Kitchen. And I'm really excited about the fact that next week on the podcast, we have the founder of The Good Kitchen on the podcast as my guest. She is quite amazing. She's got quite the entrepreneurial story. Her name's Amber Lewis, by the way. And she's providing meals for people all over the world. All over the United States, I believe, actually. And I mean, I'll tell you what, one of the biggest and best decisions I ever made in my life was allowing myself to give in to the need to either shop for or go get my lunchtime meals every day. So I get meals delivered every week, and it's convenient. It's easy. I know the quality of the ingredients. I know the quality of the source of the food. They're farmers market foods. They're organic. They're sustainable. And I don't have to think. I open the fridge, grab a meal. A lot of times I don't even heat it up. And they're delicious. I sometimes add a little bit of oil to it because I want a little bit more fat. But the Good Kitchen will deliver pre-made WLC compliant meals right to your door via FedEx, breakfast, lunch, and or dinner. If you follow this link, thegoodkitchen.com/WLC, you'll get 15% off your first order. So check them out. Check them out. Okay, let's change gears. Let's see. Upcoming guests. We got some really fun ones coming. I already told you about Amber. Yeah, I for a minute lost her name. Ryan Muncie's coming up. He's a fellow podcaster. He's been an influencer in the fitness world for a long time. Was a former fitness model, and just has a lot to contribute. He's got a book coming out about feelings. It's called The F Word, Your Feelings. That's my effort to keep this clean as possible. I've also got Martin Gabala, who wrote a book called The 1 Minute Workout. Fascinating stuff about efficient workouts, time-efficient workouts that are incredibly effective. He's an exercise physiologist. He knows. He's tested them. He's put them to the test in the lab. So, but today, ladies and gentlemen, is my conversation with Steven Sashen. Now, you probably have not heard of this guy before. You may have seen him on the Shark Tank. He brought his product, which is a company called Zero Shoes, to the Shark Tank and basically got eaten alive. The sharks do what the sharks are going to do. And Steven and his wife went in there with expectations around what they knew the value of the company was, at least to them. And those two did not align. And Steven has maintained control. Steven and his wife, her name just blew out of my head right now. But they are partners in the business. They do the whole thing together. And since that time, they launched a line of actual shoes. Prior to that, they were sandals. And now they're actually actual shoes. And they've become my go-to shoes. They are barefoot style shoes, and meaning they have no support of any kind. They have no arch support. They have no heel cushioning. They have no stability control. None of the things that you see advertised on various shoe products, in the big shoe world. None of that stuff, which actually, as it turns out, is better for your feet, better for your mechanics. You've evolved millions and millions of years. We've evolved to have really great foundational mechanics of our ability to locomote and to absorb impact. And all shoes do is get in the way, unless they're barefoot style shoes. So we talk extensively about that during the podcast. And he's been doing this since the very beginning of the barefoot running movement, like around 2009, that all started. I mean, he's cured injuries. All kinds of things have come about as a result of his work with runners and barefoot runners, and getting people to open their minds to what's possible by literally going back to the way we used to be, which is we were all barefoot. We had leather on our feet, or we were protected from scrapes and cuts and bruises, but we had, with something, we put something on our feet, but they didn't have the squishiness factor that everybody seems addicted to, thinking that would be best for their feet. We talk about that too during the podcast. So, that's coming up in a couple minutes. Next, fan of the week. And I'm not going to stop doing this, guys, because it's working. You guys are being awesome, and you are putting up your reviews. Thank you so much. The reviews that are popping up on iTunes. We got 43 reviews, guys. Thank you so much. Literally like 2 months ago, we were at 20 some reviews. So they help so much. Look, this is less for me. Look, I can get better guests. I can get more people to pay attention to my request to be on the podcast when I have more people downloading the podcast. So it does help me, but it really helps the world if you get value out of the questions and the answers and the inspiration that comes as a result of the guests being on this podcast. Let's get it in front of more people. And the more people that review it in iTunes, it's really the best way to get it noticed. So I really appreciate you guys doing it. Here, the easiest way to do that is to go to iTunes, use this link, bit.ly, bit.ly/WLC-podcast. And I almost forgot. I've got to read my fan of the week. I read one of these every week because it's important to me. And if you want yours written, and you want to perhaps win a t-shirt, because if you hear me read this online or on the air, send me an email and we will get you a t-shirt sent out. This one is written by Seattle Bike Girl. And here it is. Great guests and content. A goal of mine in 2018 is to keep up with these podcasts to keep me focused on the path to better health. I love the WLC, but I need to maintain the focus beyond the challenge. Love these podcasts to continue the education and reminder on my health. Not just food and exercise, but my overall happiness and well-being. Great job with the podcast. Keep up the good work. So Seattle Bike Girl, write in to get your free t-shirt. Thank you so much for leaving a review. And like I said, if you want yours written, go to iTunes, write a review. Can't just leave 5 stars or 4 stars. Please, you got to write something too. So, yeah, there it is. We're in week 3 of the Whole Life Challenge. And things are doing great. I've already used up all my mulligans, which is kind of funny. I've forgotten to record my score 3 times. But, yeah, it's cranking along. And my son is playing, which he's only 10 years old. But he is doing great. He's every night before he goes to bed, he reminds me, Daddy, I got to log my score. And he writes a reflection, and he's doing a great job. And that's really fun. So, yeah. So, listen, let's get on with it, right? Shall we? Steven Sashen, the founder of Zero Shoes. Welcome him in. Here we go. Well, listen, I want to get into it because we could probably talk about not what you're here for a long time.
Yeah, just let's go.
So it's funny because I actually purchased a pair. So Zero Shoes, your product. I've done the introduction already, so people know. I purchased your product probably. How long have you been doing this? It's been a long time.
Well, we started November 23rd, 2009. And for the next 3.5 years, we were selling a do-it-yourself sandal making kit.
That's exactly what I was about to talk about. I probably in 2010, 2010, 2011, I bought a do-it-yourself kit, and I had read Born to Run. I had oh gosh, what's the author of Born to Run's name?
Chris McDougall.
Chris McDougall. We had Chris McDougall out. I used to run CrossFit Los Angeles. It was my it was my gym. And when I read that book, I was on vacation. I couldn't put it down. My wife was like, "Can you
Great
like
book.
join us, please?"
Let me interject. You know, my wife, who's not an athlete or a runner, I said to her, "You got to read this book," and she picked it up and could not put it down. I mean, it's just a great story.
It's a great story, yeah. And the way he weaves the stories in and out, and it's never boring. It's never too long. Right when you're getting a little tired of one story, he weaves something else in. You know, it's really cool. But we had him out before the book was famous and he was famous. We had him out to speak at the gym. Awesome. And so he spoke at the gym. And then I went to a 5-day seminar taught by Lee Saxby, who was from that book, who had worked with Chris McDougall. And he was working with Vivo Barefoot. And
so here's how Lee and I became friends. We met at a trade show, and I said to him, like, the first thing I said was, so what do you think, should I name names? Yeah, I'll name names. What do you think about this particular New Balance shoe that was the first shoe that was brought out to be a, quote, minimalist shoe?
Yeah.
And one of the things that they did is
Was it the Minimalist? Was it or before the Minimalist?
The first Minimalist.
Okay.
And they put this like cushiony thing, this pad thing underneath what would be the ball of your foot underneath your big toe. Yeah. And so I said, what do you think of it? And the appropriate answer is, it's complete bullshit. And Lee's response was, it's complete bullshit. Like, oh my God, perfect. Because that's just not, you're not putting, that's not a place where you're landing. So you don't need cushioning there at all.
Yeah.
And it's not a place, I mean, it just doesn't do anything. It's one of those things that if you don't think or know anything about biomechanics, it looks great. But if you know anything about biomechanics, it's completely meaningless. So that was my little test.
Right.
I do that with people because I want to see if I hit them with something provocative like that because I want to see immediately if it's someone who can be my friend or if they're going to get mad at me soon when I say something.
Right.
So, so I just
Lee passed the test.
Yeah, Lee passed, and we had a great time hanging out and became friends as a result. So anyway, but you were saying, so you shortly thereafter, I found your sandals. I don't know really how I got there, but I can tell you how you got there. So on November 23rd, well, actually backing up. So I had been making these goofy ass sandals based on, again, this 5,000-year-old idea, piece of rubber, some string to tie it on your foot.
Yep.
And there's a guy here in town named Michael, named Michael Sandler, who got a contract to write a book about barefoot running. And I'd been making these sandals for local barefoot runners, and it kept kind of expanding. They tell two friends and they tell two friends. Uh-huh. And he said, if you had a website, treated this like a business, I'd put you in my book. So I rush home and I pitch this idea to my wife, who tells me it is a really stupid idea.
Don't do this. Don't quit your day job.
That's right. Total distraction of what we're, from what we're doing.
What were you doing? What were you doing before you did this?
Well, it's a tricky question. We had mostly been retired for the 10 years prior to that.
Wow.
But then what allowed us to retire was some real estate investing that we had done. In 2006, we said, oh shit, the market is turning. So we started selling everything because we could see that something bad was about to happen. And by 2009, we weren't quite sure what we were going to do. Frankly, the real estate stuff we were doing, we thought was going to be income for the rest of our life. And then that changed. And so, I've been an internet marketer since 1992, and I started a search engine optimization business a couple months before the time frame that I'm talking about now. And so after she told me, don't do it, it's a waste of time and a distraction, I said, you are completely right, I'm sure. And after she went to bed, I built a website. And the next day, what I did to kind of calm her down, I said, look, the people who are ranking for all the barefoot related keywords are clearly there by accident. We were starting a search engine business. I said, this will be a great case study. I can own this in about 3 months.
Right.
And I was wrong. It only took me 2 months. And within 2 months, this was clearly our full-time job.
Right.
Just selling this sandal making kit and giving people what we like to call the superpower of knowing how to make their own footwear. It's amazing.
It's amazing. It is amazing. I was amazed by it. I think I got 2 different designs. Like one was a little bit thicker than the other, I believe, if I remember right. And I built them. They were different colors. I had one purple one and one, like black, I think. And my wife almost left me when I showed up wearing them.
There's sort of one. There's that reaction. The other one is all the rest of the family starts getting into it.
Yeah, no, that was not the reaction in my house. It's the opposite. And so they sat in my, I would wear them. I wore them to the gym a few times. I worked out with them. I ran with them. I didn't work out with them.
Yeah, they're great.
I actually did work out with them. What the heck? It's just like working out barefoot.
Yeah, exactly. You get a little protection, so you don't have to worry what you're stepping in, other people's crotch sweat or whatever.
Yeah.
And so,
and if you're running outside, you don't have to worry about gravel or rocks or sand or whatever.
And at a CrossFit gym, they're the perfect thing for pulling and squats. I mean, it's just, you don't want your heel elevated if you can avoid it.
Right.
You want to be able to feel the ground, so you're engaging your feet. We had a lot of power lifters who started using those. It was brilliant. How
did you go from being a sandal maker to being a shoemaker?
Probably some neurological dysfunction, something. We had guys early on, like 7 months into the business, who had been at major footwear companies for 40 years. And then they met us and loved what we were doing and said, let's see if we can help you. And during the course of this meeting we had, they kept saying over and over, we would love to start this with you, but we've been in footwear for a long time and we're not stupid enough to start a shoe company. So Lane and I said, look, we know we're naive and optimistic, but that's the way any entrepreneur is walking in the door. Yeah. If you could know in advance what you know in retrospect, nobody would ever do anything.
That's so funny. It's funny you're saying that, because I literally just had that conversation the other day regarding the Whole Life Challenge. If I had known the amount of money it was going to cost us and the amount of time it was going to take us to build what we've built, I would never have started. There's no way I would have started.
Yeah, people ask me about entrepreneurialism, and I go, the most important. There's sort of a push me pull you between blind naive optimism and stark realism, and it's a real tough call. Now, the interesting thing is, Lane and I have split those roles. So she likes to say, "You have the good job of thinking all the cool stuff we can do, and I have the bad job of telling you that we can't afford it." And so, but my wife is brilliant. And so, after I'm done pouting, I realize that she's right and I figure out a way to deal with it. But suffice it to say, the answer is pretty simple. We started making these sandals. People were going, "Oh my God, these are amazing. But what do I want to do if I want to wear something that doesn't make my wife want to leave me? If I want to wear something in the winter, or I want to wear something at work?" And so the first thing we did, we didn't go straight to shoes. We went to a ready to wear version of our sandals. And then that was a couple of years. And then
what does that mean? What does a ready-to-wear version mean?
Oh, so the first thing we were doing is this do-it-yourself kit. And so we came up with what we call our two sandals, the Cloud and the Venture, which are just essentially the kit, but already done. So you just slip them on your foot and zip up the lacing and away you go. Then people were liking that sandal, but they said, "Hey, I need something that's a little more sturdy, so something I can use in the water maybe." And then we did sport sandals like Chaco, Teva, Keen. Except our first one, called the Z Trek, is just like Barefoot again. It's actually that same rubber that you used for one of your sandals with a Z pattern webbing so that it locks onto your foot a little better. And then the next one was more of a total sport sandal killer. So it's more of a real competition with Chaco, Teva, Keen. It weighs 1/4 as much. Let me back up. Everything we do has been inspired by two things: customers asking us what they telling us what they want, us kind of planning the future, and a commitment to natural movement and a commitment to letting feet work the way they're supposed to work. This is the fundamental core of what we do, is that 1/4 of the bones and joints of your whole body are in your feet, more nerve endings in your soles than anywhere but your lips and your fingertips. And this is not an accident. You're supposed to use these things. And like anything on your body, if you don't use it, you lose it. And most people have lost it when it comes to feet, because they're in shoes that squeeze their toes, that elevate their heel and jack up their posture, that aren't flexible enough to move properly, that give you, quote, support, which is the same thing as weakening things, because if you put your arm in a cast to support it, it gets weaker over time. Same thing with your foot. So our commitment is to natural movement. And anyway, so the sandal thing kept evolving because people kept asking, and that was a natural extension for us as we were working on designing shoes, because people would say, again, what do I do in the cold or at work? And so in 2000, I can't remember when things happened anymore. Let's call it a year and a half ago, we launched our first closed-toed shoe, a product called the Hana, which is a casual canvas shoe. And then in April of this year, March, April of this year, we launched our Prio, a running fitness shoe. Later this year, we launched our Daylight Hiker, a lightweight hiking boot, and the Colton, a casual leather shoe that's really, really cool looking. So it's just been an evolution as we have.
I'm wearing mine. I'm wearing them right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're awesome. They're fantastic. As soon as I got a pair, I'm like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for.
There's a guy named Phil Maffetone who's been a long distance running coach for years.
Yeah, he's famed from Mark Allen and heart rate zones, and Yep. And
Phil called him the best running shoe ever made. Danny Dreyer from Chi Running, same thing. I mean, it's because that shoe is, again, it's the same idea. Someone said, we had a guy who'd been in the sporting goods industry for a long time. He said, "Why are you moving into shoes when you haven't really maxed out sandals?" I said, "Our shoes are our sandal with an upper." He goes, "Ah, okay."
Right.
So it's still that same commitment to natural as much as you can. Now, it's not as, what's the word I want to use? A sandal without an upper is more forgiving for many, many different foot shapes and sizes and configurations. A shoe, not quite so much, unfortunately. I love the idea of making something that fits every human foot, but man, we have seen some crazy ass feet.
Do you get customers that send you pictures and go, "Hey, your shoes won't fit"?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you send us a picture from a human, please? What the hell is that? I mean, we've seen people whose feet are wider than they are long.
Really?
And practically square. I mean, and I will confess, as a person who sells things, it amazes me when someone will send us an email saying things like, "I haven't had a shoe that fits my foot in 40 years," and then they get mad because ours don't either. It's
right.
We're not a multi-billion-dollar company who can accommodate every human being.
Well, if you want custom footwear made, maybe we could send you to somebody who'll make custom footwear, but it's not us.
Well, It's even like that when people are like size 16 and 17. They go, why do you make something for us? I go, because it costs like 5 or 10 grand to make each new size.
Right.
And there's only 4 of you guys.
Yeah.
If we were making a shoe for the NBA, and by the way, we're working on something, then that's a different story. But
you could send them the instructions for building your sandals.
I do that.
It's perfect.
Yeah, we do that.
You can make exactly the right sandal for your foot. Boom.
That's right.
Here you go.
That's right.
Get some scissors, get a template. You're good to go.
And some people are into it, and some people, of course, are not.
Right.
But it is sort of an amazing thing that that people don't understand feet. I don't know what it is about the West where people are. I mean, there's people obviously of foot fetishes, but by and large, people think that feet are ugly when they're not. People think that feet are dirty when they're not. I mean, there's this weird relationship that people have. But the other thing people have is they don't realize something that's kind of wacky. Like for every different size, there are 54 different shapes that are possible for that foot. And the other thing is, you can take 2 people who have the exact same 2-dimensional width of a foot who fit a shoe completely different because there's that 3-dimensional component that you can't measure. So for years and years, we've done your length and your width, and they think, oh, that's what size I am. But that's not actually a representation of what size you are. And there are people who've tried to accommodate that, to fix that, come up with strategies for addressing that. But they are expensive, and they don't work if you try to find a way to create a 3D fitting model that works for every shoe you might want to buy. So, because there's way too many shoes. So it's a very interesting thing. I'm actually talking to some guys about doing some interesting stuff with augmented reality. So think Pokemon Go for your feet, and doing that as a way of doing some fitting methodology.
Did you learn all this in your quest to create your first shoes? Like you did I'm guessing you didn't know this when you were making sandals. Sandals don't have the same requirements.
No, I learned it really quickly, apparently. Oh boy. So I have a really weird history and probably weird neurology. So I have a knack for understanding physical movement. As an undergraduate, I did cognitive psychology research on cognitive aspects of motor skill acquisition. I've taught everything from gymnastics to Zen archery to Tai Chi to yoga to running. Typically, if there's some new physical skill thing that I get into, I'm teaching it within a few months or working with whomever's teaching it, because I just have a sort of knack for that.
Yeah, right.
And I have a knack.
The opposite of that I call motor moron. So you're not you're the opposite of a motor moron.
No. And well, look, most of us we don't get a lot of practice learning how to understand proprioceptive information. You ask the average person to put their arm straight out parallel to the ground, and it'll be too high or too low, and they don't know it. You ask them where their body is in space. Then, boy, I had people send me videos early on. They got our sandals, and they said, something problem with the sandal, like something's wearing out. I said, if you're getting wear in that area, you're heel striking and overstriding. And they would say, oh, no, I'm not. I teach pose method running, and I if anything, my heel lightly kisses the ground. They use that phrase over and over and over, lightly kisses the ground. And I would say, I'm just talking about the physics of this, man. If you're wearing something out, that's horizontal force, that's abrasion, that's friction. And you're in that place. The only way you can do that is if you're heel striking and overstriding. They'd send me a video. One guy sent me a video, and I couldn't get the video, but I could hear the audio, and I could just hear ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum with every foot strike. So it was obvious. And then I got the video to play, and I got him on Skype with me, and I watched the video with him frame by frame. And the guy, at first, he wouldn't admit that was overstriding and heel striking, even though I drew all the lines and showed it. And then while watching his own video, he said, but I don't do that. Well, dude,
is that a model? Is that a who'd you pay to videotape?
Yeah. Well, one guy, he said he did a little run around the parking lot where he was doing kind of an unboxing video, and he said something I love. He said, wow, these will really tell you if you're overstriding, trying to make it sound like it's a good training aid for you. But what he discovered is that he'd been wearing 5-finger shoes for years and didn't know that he was heel striking and overstriding the whole time because there was enough padding in those to be able to make you not notice that. Yep. So people are often you tell someone, try to land with your foot more underneath your center of mass, underneath your body. And many people they'll still reach out with their foot if that's what they've been used to. And they literally can't tell. So let me back up. This is something that I call the 4 neurological patterns of human beings and barefoot runners. If I gave you the simplest instruction for running in bare feet, running naturally, it would be take off your shoes, find a nice, smooth, hard surface, go for a very short, like 30-second run. And if it hurts, wait till you feel better, then do something different until you're having fun. Now, that if it hurts is the magic phrase. Right. Some people, they literally can't tell if it hurts. Right. their brain map has so de-differentiated. In other words, they've not used their feet for so long that the nerves down there, your brain's going to ask, I don't need to pay attention to that. And so they can't feel it. So they need to walk around on unpleasant surfaces just to wake up the neural pathways again. Some people can feel if it hurts, but they're not really good at knowing how to do something different part.
Could you put people that tell you that they can't tell how it hurts on a hard surface, could you just put them on some gravel on top of the hard surface?
Yeah. You can. I mean, you'd want them just to do something. What's the word I'm looking for? You don't want them just to go running right away. You just need to wake up that nervous pathway.
Yep.
Tell your brain that those feet matter again. And that can take a little bit of time. Who knows how long? It's different for each person. So that second group, they can feel, but they're not good at that proprioceptive thing. So you need to give them video feedback to show them what to do because they don't see it otherwise. They don't feel it otherwise.
Yep.
And you need to get that immediate feedback. It's like, oh, I thought I was doing that, but I'm actually doing this. Okay. And that goes back and forth. There's a guy named Ralph Mann. That's how he trains sprinters. In essence, is he's got a map of what a perfect sprinter should look like. And then he just maps your actual video to that map so you can see how you're doing different than what you should be doing. The third group, they can feel if it hurts. They actually have pretty good proprioceptive skills, and they just need some cues about what to do because you'd figure it out on your own. But if you give them a couple cues, they go, oh, okay, that's cool. If I land with my ankle behind my knee, okay, I can work with that. That's cool. If I try to lift my leg off the ground instead of push my leg off the ground, okay, I get that. I know what that is. So you can give them simple cues and away they go. And then the fourth group, they're naturals and they just go for it. And the problem they have is they're having so much fun that they end up doing too much and they get tired. And as you get tired, you lose the ability to do all those previous steps.
Yep.
And so they're a big part of the too much too soon camp.
I went through a very strange experience when I switched from heel striking to a barefoot style. I went through this period where I lost all ability to tell how fast I was running. Like I would I would do a 400-meter run in the middle of a workout or just on its own, and without a stopwatch, without any way to measure what I was doing, I had no idea of my intensity, of how hard I was working. I had no idea what my legs should be doing. It was really, really weird, and it lasted a while. It was like a six to 8 month process of like, and actually, I don't even know if it was 6 to 8 months. It might have been like a year or 2 years. It was a long time before I felt more comfortable knowing.
The transition, people ask, they say things like, I've got a marathon coming up. Can I get your shoes and wear them? I go, are you out of your mind?
Right.
There's no way to know that.
Right.
So even if you were just switching from an old pair of shoes to the same model and a new pair of shoes, I would tell you, I don't know.
Yep.
So different people take different amounts of time. And some people pick it up right away. Some people takes more. But there definitely is an unusual let me add one other part. The process of learning a new movement pattern is difficult, and we misinterpret the signs of that difficulty because of the way we're taught about how to deal with frustration. So it's energy inefficient. Think of this from an evolutionary perspective. It's really inefficient to try to learn to move differently than the way you already are. It takes a lot of effort. Your brain is wired to get into loops and get into patterns. So learning a new physical skill is just a challenging thing. The process of laying down new neural pathways to learn a new physical skill, and again, this is my undergraduate research, the process of doing that is energy intensive. And the way we experience the energy intensive nature of laying down new neural pathways, breaking out of old ones, is an experience that we typically call frustration.
Right.
We forget that the way learning happens, the way physical learning happens in particular, is that we go out and do this difficult thing that's frustrating, and then we rest, and there's this integrating process, and then we come back a day or two is actually better than one, 2 days later, and we're doing the thing better even though we didn't practice in the meantime.
Right.
And that's a continual process until suddenly you don't even remember that it was frustrating because now you're just doing it and you're not thinking about it. And it's unfortunate that we don't remember that we went through that process, because the next time we go through it, we get frustrated again and we think that's a bad thing.
Right.
It's just, that's the way it is. That's the sign that you're learning, is by when you get that unpleasant experience of feeling uncoordinated and not knowing what you're doing and actually sometimes being uncoordinated.
Yeah.
I had that. One of my first sprinting coaches, he taught me a new way to do the drills that I had been doing for 5 years up until then. And it took me a month till I could do them correctly. And then I couldn't go back to the old wrong way of doing it. Right. So now I can. I've gotten familiar with that. But we just don't understand. We don't have a good history or good framework for understanding what it takes to learn new movement. And people get frustrated way too quickly, or they get turned off by the frustration very quickly, not realizing that that's just part of the learning process.
Yeah, right.
And I wish that somehow we learned that earlier on, so it wouldn't be, quote, frustrating. It would just be like, hey, I'm learning.
Right. So. It's funny because, I always tell this to people, you would never go to college thinking that you'll get your degree. You'll get whatever it is you're studying down in a semester. Like that, just there's no context for that. You'd be like, oh, I'm in for 4 years. Right. Why don't people approach their training and development?
Here's why. Because it's the difference is when you use your college analogy, there's a problem with that analogy. It breaks down when you talk to people about writing. Everybody thinks they can write because it's something they've been doing to a certain degree their whole life,
sure.
or since they were 5, 7, whatever it is. And we tend to overestimate our skill at things. If you ask someone, do you think you're an above average driver? 80% of people will say yes. But frankly, it should only be 50% of people, because that's what average means. Right. So same thing with running or walking or lifting things. We think that we should be able to do it effectively and efficiently and easily and well because we've all been doing it.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course I know. What do you mean I need to learn how to run?
Yeah,
Watch, I can run. See, I'm running.
It's one of the craziest things. It's one of the big predicaments around being a coach of barefoot runners. Like people don't think they need. Like, why?
No,
learn to run? That's crazy.
And look, I'm a competitive sprinter. If you want to see something really funny, watch people who say that they're going out doing a sprint workout or a speed workout, who are just doing the same thing they do when they're doing long distance running, slightly faster.
Right.
But then compare that to a video of an actual sprinter, and you'll see it's a completely different thing that's going on.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's So you're.
You can do it.
I'm just thinking of so many things. My God, I mean, these conversations are generating so many questions in my mind, and so your path into this business was really out of your own experience in a lot of different things.
It's my experience, my weird background of doing all these different things, and it just.
But why running? Why running? What was special about that? What was special about creating those first sandals?
Yeah. So I was that kid in elementary school, junior high, and high school who was the fastest kid you knew. I was that guy until everyone got to be taller than me. I'm 5'5", and once everyone got to be 6 feet tall, it's like I was no longer the fastest kid.
Right.
One of them, but then I became a long.
What year did that happen? How old were you?
16, 17.
Yeah, right. Like freshman, sophomore year of high school.
Yeah. Suddenly all my best friends were taller than me. It's like, what the hell? So, in fact, I went back to my 30th high school reunion, and the kids that were my same size, they all got taller. What happened?
Wow.
Got really ripped off. So,
you were still fast, but you weren't as fast as the faster, longer, taller people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, and just not naturally. And the coach that I had in high school didn't actually know how to coach sprinters. So if I had some coaching, I would have been just as fast as any of them, because I am just as fast as them, but it didn't happen. So I stopped sprinting in high school. I focused on gymnastics. I became an All-American gymnast. I was a pole vaulter and a long jumper for the indoor track season. And then so I had a 30-year break. And one day,
what do you mean a 30-year break? You just quit? Running. You just stopped? Oh, it's from running. You didn't stop doing all those things. You
I tried doing everything else. I kept doing gymnastics till I was in my early 30s. Blew out my knee. I got into circus things. I was doing Chinese pole and crazy acrobatic stuff.
Wow.
I did a lot of things, but never found anything that I was a competitive jump roper, speed jump roper, and trick jump roper.
Cool.
But I never found anything that really. It was actually a lot of fun. I never found anything that really made me go ooh and ah. And then one day at brunch, a guy says, came in, a friend of mine says, I just won my first 5K. And I said, yeah, I've tried, quote, running, but I'm just not a runner, man. It just never worked. I was a sprinter. He goes, well, there's a whole Masters track and field circuit, right, where they do all the sprinting events too. I went, I'm sorry, what? And he goes, there's coaches in town who will coach you. It's like, what? And so I immediately called a local coach. I showed up the next day. And in the first couple of years, I was getting injured constantly. And I'm walking around the kitchen one day, or let me say that differently. I'm somehow moving with my legs underneath me. I wouldn't even call it walking. And my wife turns to me and says, quite literally, just inquisitive, she says, are you having fun? And I said, oh my God, you have no idea how much. And so I just loved the training. I hated the injury. And that's what got me into the barefoot thing. Is a friend of mine who's a world champion cross country runner said, try taking off your shoes and see what you discover. And so I went for a barefoot run with that guy, Michael Sandal, I mentioned before, who just happened to be doing a barefoot running workshop the next weekend here in town. And again, I'm a sprinter. Okay.
Yep.
I think the longest I'd ever run on purpose was a mile, and I was not of my own volition. That was the warm up that everyone on our team did, and I did not like that at all.
Yep.
And so I went out for this barefoot run, and I was so entranced with the different feelings and what would happen if I changed my cadence but not my speed, changed my speed but not my cadence, changed my foot strike, it was so fascinating. At the end of this run, someone had a GPS watch on, and I said, how far did we just go? She said, that was a little over 5K. I said, I'm sorry, what? And so I was shocked. I also had a big blister on the ball of my left foot.
Huh.
Now, I've had many people email me who have tried barefoot running and say, well, I got a blister, so this is bullshit. And I go, my thought was not that. My thought was, how come my right foot was okay? What was going on with my right foot? And so the next week I went out for my second barefoot run thinking, if I can figure out what my right foot was doing and get my left foot to do that, maybe
your right foot had the blister, or your left foot had the blister?
Left foot had the blister. In essence, I was thinking, if I could run in a way that gaping hole in my left foot wasn't hurting, then I was probably not doing the thing that caused the blister to begin with.
Right.
So I thought I'd give myself like 10 minutes, see what happens. At the 9-minute and 30-second mark, where it had been nothing but excruciating pain up until then, suddenly in one stride, everything changed. The pain disappeared, could not find it. My running got faster, easier, lighter. My breathing got slower and more relaxed. Now, what I had done just by trying to figure out what my right leg was doing better was I stopped overstriding, reaching out too far with my foot. So I was landing on the ball of my foot, which is what sprinters do, but applying braking forces whenever I did that. So it's in front of me. So every time my foot hits the ground, it's trying to slow me down. So that's a lot of friction. And then I was pulling my foot across the ground as well, which was adding additional friction. So I just stopped doing both of those things. And over the next couple of weeks, that pattern got nice and ingrained into my body. My injuries went away. I became a Masters All-American sprinter not too long after that. So that was the beginning. And I just wanted that feeling as often as I could have it, because clearly it was good for me. And luckily I was living in Boulder, Colorado, where, walking around in a pair of goofy ass sandals that you made from Home Depot supplies is sort of the most normal thing anybody does.
But how did you come up with the idea to build sandals? I mean, were you inspired by the Tarahumara and Chris McDougall's book, or where did that idea come from?
Yeah, I got Born to Run around that same time. I'd known about the Tarahumara. I'd known about the Huarache sandals that they had made out of tire scraps. I poked around online. I found some people who were doing some similar things that hadn't quite gotten put together. I found a rubber supplier who sold me stuff thinking I was a shoe store, not realizing that I wasn't. I kind of, took some existing ideas, put them together in a different way, and tweaked them a little bit to make them my own, and away it went. What were you running in before that, and how different? Some classic pair of like Asics high-heeled running shoes.
Because back in those days, there was nothing really flat. Five Fingers were the first real flat shoes.
You could find racing flats.
Racing flats. Yeah.
But when I got back into sprinting, I mean, it was the first question that I asked the coach that I was working with, and everyone that was running. I said, "What should I get for shoes?" And they pointed me to some Asics something that a lot of people were wearing.
I think I had a pair of Kilkennies. I think those were my first flat. My first attempt at flat shoes.
I don't remember what these things were. Well, I'll tell you, I remember when I was 10 years old and the first Nike Waffle Trainer came out, and that shoe was practically a minimalist shoe. It was a tiny little bit of padding, the waffle sole, and it had a massive amount of toe spring, which means there's this arc coming up from the ball of your foot to your toe that, because the sole was kind of stiff, when you lean forward on a shoe with toe spring, it rocks you onto your toes, which is their accommodation for the fact that they don't let your foot move. But as a sprinter, when I was 10, I leaned forward and it put me onto my toes, which is where I ran to begin with. And it was like magic. It's like, this is what I do.
Right.
But when you get it, the rest of the shoe though was horrible. And any running shoe that does not let your foot bend and flex and move, that doesn't let you feel the ground, that has support in almost any way. Wait, I'll tell you this. Here's the way it goes. Okay, so years ago, Bill Bowerman at Nike had runners coming to him who were getting Achilles tendonitis. And he said to one of the orthopedic surgeons who worked in the same building that he was in, what do I do? And the orthopedic surgeon says, oh, well, clearly their Achilles tendons have been shortened by wearing higher heeled dress shoes and casual shoes. So you need to build up the heel on your shoe so that it can accommodate that.
So accommodate the dysfunction.
Yes. Now, a couple of years later, this same orthopedic surgeon recanted and said, I just made that up. My apologies. No evidence for any of that. I was making prosthetics at the time, so I saw everything as needing a prosthetic solution. But by then it was too late because that style had gotten popular for Nike, and the footwear industry is a bunch of copycats. They see something that sells well, suddenly, whoa, we got to do that because that's what people want.
Right.
And there's no there. There's no research behind it. There's no evidence that it does anything. So, but here's where it gets entertaining. If you put padding under your heel, you will land on that padding. In part because it's almost impossible not to if you have enough padding, and in part because your brain does this wacky thing where it looks for the padding. I don't know why, it just does that. So, and it's not a good thing to do. When you land on your heel, it sends a giant spike of force up through all your joints rather than using the muscles and ligaments and tendons of your lower body the way they're designed, which is shock absorbers and springs. But here's the bigger one. When you land on your heel is a ball. A ball is unstable. There's no way to stabilize that ball that you've just landed on. So suddenly people are pronating or supinating, and then suddenly the shoe companies are going, ooh, we gotta take care of that pronation and supination problem.
Yep.
And the other problem is when you land on your heel, your foot is fully outstretched when it lands. So your plantar fascia, the tendons underneath your foot, and the bones of your foot are flattened rather than in their strong position. So think about doing a bicep curl. Your arm is the weakest when it's straight. It's the strongest when it's at about almost 90 degrees.
Right.
Same thing with your foot. Weakest when it's flat, strongest when the arch is engaged. If you land flat because you've rolled from your heel down to your foot, you're in this weak position trying to apply force. That puts extra strain on your plantar fascia.
Right.
So suddenly you need support too. So if you
or you're hitting plantar fasciitis or getting other tendon dysfunction.
Right. So people are getting plantar fasciitis because they're putting their plantar fascia under strain in a weak position rather than landing in a way where you're in a strong position and it's not an issue. I've met people who said, I'm about to get plantar fascia surgery because I've got plantar fasciitis, and I say, can you stand on your toes? They go, yeah. I go, well, does that hurt? And they go, no. I said, well, do you know why that doesn't hurt? They go, no. I said, well, because when you're on your toes, your arch is flexed as well. So your plantar fascia are strong. I said, can you just bounce back and forth from one foot to the other while you're still on your toes? They go, yeah, I can. I go, does that hurt? They go, no. I go, do you know why? And they go, well, no. I said, because you're keeping your plantar fascia in a strong position. You're not putting the tissue under strain. And I said, now while you're just bouncing back and forth from foot to foot, can you just lean forward a little bit? And they lean forward and then they start running. And they look at me with their eyes bugging out. What the hell just happened?
Right.
I said, yeah. So that's what happens and I'm not saying you run on your toes, but I just showed you that if you put your plantar fascia in a strong position, you don't have a problem. And the other thing with plantar fasciitis, and this is also related to landing on your heel, is a lot of times people are diagnosed with plantar fasciitis, but it's actually just that their calf is really tight and it's pulling on the plantar fascia from the top. Mm-hmm. And you can have tight calves from that same issue when you can't use your feet properly, your calves and your knees and your hips and your back will try to take over in ways that they're not designed to. So many times I've seen people who have injuries that doctors who've never looked at a runner on a high-speed video and wouldn't know what they were seeing even if they did, have misdiagnosed them and given them expensive orthotics that just make them weaker over time, have put them in shoes that make them weaker over time and set them up to be biomechanically inefficient. I mean, it's just, it's because we've had 45 years of footwear companies selling you their fake solution that now it's become common wisdom, and it's not common, nor is it wise.
What do you tell people who
have your shoes?
Just change your shoes.
Take them off.
Take them off.
Take them off. It's not about changing your shoes. And, this is another thing. So when the minimalist footwear thing started, and it started because shoe companies freaked out about the barefoot idea that suddenly everyone was going to run barefoot and they would never sell another shoe.
Right.
They came out with what they called Minimalist, which was a little lower heel and lighter. And they claimed that it gave you the same benefits as running barefoot when there was no evidence for that whatsoever. And then some shoe companies who never were going to make anything truly minimalist, which is what we do, they said, oh, well, you need a transition shoe to get from the high heel thing you're wearing now to something, really minimalist. And so they made things that were lower and lower. Zero evidence for that whatsoever, completely fake. It's sort of like if you go to the gym, you don't need to, you don't need to not get on a stationary bike first. You don't need to, just like pedal in the air before you get on a bike. I mean, that's absurd. You get on a bike.
Right.
You get on the bike, you just don't do a whole lot at first.
Right.
You build up.
Right.
Same thing. You want to go to something that's as close to barefoot as possible, or barefoot, and just build up slowly, because you need that feedback. Again, you need to feel things and develop these new neural pathways, and you're not going to get them by following any of the advice from any of the major shoe companies. Flat out.
Do you find that people that do that and are willing to try this this radical idea of
hold on, stop right there. It's not radical. Prior to 1972, every shoe was made kind of like mine, really low, really flat, really flexible. Prior to, go back a couple hundred more years, everybody on the planet, all human beings, and like literally tens of billions who have lived, ran barefoot or in something with basically just enough protection, and that's it. So this is the radical idea, is the motion controlled stability protective shoe.
Right. I was kind of being sarcastic. Is this radical idea of like modern shoe companies that we all have been brought up to believe that this is the right way to do things. Yeah. This radical person who's telling us just take your shoes off. Have you seen that the people that are willing to do that? Have you seen these problems clear up?
Only hundreds of thousands of them.
That's all. Come on. I want more evidence.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. That's really cool.
And so Vibram, the Five Finger Company, they got sued in a class action lawsuit for claiming that their shoes would help you strengthen your feet. And they hadn't actually done a piece of science to demonstrate that. So that's why they got sued. And the lawsuit settled for pennies. I believe it was, and because it was a settlement, there's no evidence for this, but I do know people in the industry who have led me to believe the following thing. I believe it was because there was enough evidence showing that if you simply use your feet rather than support your feet, they get stronger. And clearly, without that shoe and things like ours, let you use your feet more than other shoes. So I think the plaintiff realized they didn't have a good case. There was enough dots you could connect into a line, even though there wasn't a straight line from research to that shoe. And Irene Davis at Harvard has done research that showed if you actually use your feet in a truly minimalist shoe, that you can. What they have to say funny things. They have to say things like the diameter of the muscle fibers increased, which is another way of saying you get stronger.
Right.
So there is research that shows that, again, use it or lose it. This is not rocket science.
What's the craziest thing you've seen get quote unquote fixed from switching to a minimalist shoe?
Name anything.
I mean, like shoulder injury or a neck problem or upper, things that people might not even ever consider that could be related.
Yeah. I don't remember if I've heard people talk about neck, shoulder, back, upper back stuff, although it's entirely possible because, again, if you think about it, so like right now I'm holding my hand out in front of my body with my thumb pointing to my chest and my elbow at the same height as my wrist. If that's a definable thing. And then I'm wiggling my fingers. That's what your feet are supposed to do. That's how you balance yourself. That's how you know what you're stepping on and in. That's how you adjust your gait and the rest of your body. If you don't let your feet do that, that function tries to move up. And now I'm pointing at my wrist and I will say ankle, and then to your knee, which I'm pointing at my elbow, and then to your back, and I'm pointing at my shoulder.
It just moves right up the kinetic chain. I mean, it's
moves up the chain. Yeah. And the chain, the hip bone's connected to the leg bone. Yeah. And so I wouldn't be surprised if I scanned my emails and the reviews of our product, we would find people who said that neck and back pain went away, or certainly neck and upper back pain went away. We have lots and lots. Now, sorry, I've got to preface this. This is not a cure. This is not a medical device.
Right.
We're not promising anything.
Right.
I mean, I got to say that.
Yeah, of course. True. Yeah. Right.
But if you think about it logically, it isn't surprising that people would have these reports for the reasons that we're describing. So my favorite is from people who say, I have a job where I stand on my feet all day, and this is the first time I've been happy at the end of the day, because it's those little micro movements in your feet that take all the pressure off those upper joints. And I've experienced that. I have a broken spine. If I put on regular shoes, my back is shot. If I'm barefoot or in my shoes, totally fine.
Wow.
Again, this is not, I hate to keep, I like to say it's not rocket science, or as they said 15,000 years ago when they started making footwear, it's not rock science. the evolutionary phenomenon that led to human bodies. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Whoever came up with it, the evolution is about doing good enough, not perfect.
Yep.
The good enough, though, for how these things function is pretty good. And it's very hard to come up with an intervention that is going to be an improvement over what evolutionary biology did. The American College of Sports Medicine wrote a paper. I just did a video about this. They wrote a paper a couple of years ago with their recommendations for how to buy a running shoe. If you took their paper and their recommendations into almost any running shoe store in the country, and I couch that because there are a couple of running shoe stores that are hip to the idea of natural movement, but very few. But if you took that to almost any running shoe store in the country, they would tell you that all those recommendations are complete bullshit, totally the opposite of what you want. Because what the American College of Sports Medicine says is the primary function of the shoe is to protect your foot. You do not want excessive cushioning or arch support. And I think they were being politically correct by using the word excessive rather than just saying you don't want cushioning or arch support.
Yep.
Because then what they talk about is what we do, and ironically, not what they have in the photos that are attached to the article, which is all excessive arch support, excessive support, flared soles so that your foot hits the wrong spot, or your foot doesn't hit. The shoe hits before your foot does at an angle where you don't actually have a foot. There's all these crazy things about the way running shoes work now, and all the research is unequivocal about going more minimalist. The only research that I've ever seen that comes close to suggesting that you wear regular running shoes, at least the papers that I've seen were from labs that are sponsored by major shoe companies.
Yep.
And it's typically researching something like VO2 max and saying, hey, this particular product helped improve people's VO2 max. For most people, they would never know the difference and it wouldn't make a difference. And I haven't seen anything, and I'm happy to be wrong about this, I haven't seen anything where there is a direct correlation between VO2 max, how well you process oxygen, and performance. Because one thing I know about high-level athletes is one of the things that makes them good is they tolerate being right on the edge better than the average bear.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of hand-waving and red herrings in the research that the shoe companies sponsored labs have come out showing that, hey, this shoe is good.
Well, it's really interesting. Everybody seems to be obsessed with the lightness of shoes. like a buddy of mine came in. He runs 50 milers and 100 milers, and he wears Hokas, and this was like 4 years ago when he first showed me his Hokas and how great they were, and I just shook my head. And then and now Nike, Nike's doing this big thing with their what are they called? The
Vaporfly.
Yeah, the Vaporfly, right?
Yeah, it's not misguided. Lightness is important, but it is not the be all and end all by a long stretch. So back to Phil Maffetone, he wrote a book called 159 about what he thinks it would take for someone to break 2 hours in a marathon. Mm-hmm. And it would not be by drafting behind 6 other runners on a giant car with a wall in front of you, which is what Nike did for their sub-2 experiment. And he says it's going to be someone running barefoot, because like Ron Hill, who was in the Mexico City Olympics, I think he ran the 10K, but don't hold me to it. I think he won the 10K, but don't hold me to it. Someone asked him why he ran barefoot, and he said it was the lightest shoe I could get my hands on.
Right.
And so the lightness is important, but there are other factors that are equally important, and training will outpace or will outdo lightness, any day. When you're at the point where you're talking about shaving off fractions of a percentage of your performance over a long distance, every little bit helps. Yeah. But as we saw with the Nike 2-hour experiment, they brought in 3 world champion runners and 2 of them dropped out. Mm-hmm. So it ain't all about the footwear. Right. What are some of the like your question, your oh wait, sorry, wait, by the way, I am working on a shoe that I think will destroy all those. Huh. Yeah. Well, but not in the same style. You're not going to do Hoka big style. Yeah, big thick padding. Big thick padding where your foot can't move. Exactly. Right. But let me say something a bit about big thick padding where your foot can't move. I don't know if you know the shoe, the MBT, the Masai Barefoot technology. I don't think so. No. Big rocker sole, like a 3-inch high rocker sole. It's actually similar to the Hoka in many ways. I wore those when I had ripped my calves because they allowed me to walk without having to actually use any energy. So I could just roll on the sole. It allowed me to move. One of the things that people do that I find almost laughable is they try to compare themselves to these elite Olympic athletes who are genetic freaks.
Right.
When someone says, well, so-and-so who's this amazing athlete does the following, why don't I do the same? I go, well, because you're not a 5'2", 205-pound Kenyan. That's why.
That's right. Right.
So they'll often, some of them will do things that are not the best for your body, but they have figured out it allows them to compete at this very high level. And you will notice that you don't see very many of them over the age of 40. So not running, at least. I mean, not that they die at the age of 40, but there's things that you can do that are, quote, more efficient or allow you to run faster that will destroy you. But when you are one of the top 5 athletes in the world and your livelihood for your entire life depends on the possibility of winning an Olympic medal, guess what you're willing to do? Anything.
Pretty much anything. Yep. So. Yeah, no, it's always one of the things I talk about with people a lot is being a professional athlete is not, you don't want to look to professional athletes as pillars of health or pillars of, the way you should do things, because they're willing to do things because of their sport to be at the top of their game that you wouldn't do in your normal life.
You'd never do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What if you go back to that test you threw out to Lee Saxby about the padding on the ball, on the ball of the foot, what are some of the why don't those work? One of my experiences with minimalist running is I wore Viva Barefoot shoes exclusively for quite some time, and I found myself getting this weird stabbing pain in my first big toe joint. And my solution for it was to add a little bit of padding. So I went with the New Balance Minimalist, and I wore the Minimalist for many years. I've recently been experimenting with going back to minimal. Obviously, I'm wearing your shoes, but I also use a toe spreader, and that seems to help. But go ahead.
I mean, the number one cause of the pain that you're describing is, of course, alien abduction.
Of course,
and everyone knows that,
right?
So. But the number 2 cause, I would never try and diagnose you over the internet without seeing your foot and seeing how things move. Suffice it to say, the fact that you're using a toe spreader is interesting because it's entirely possible that it could just be one of those things that's working out as your biomechanics are changing and your joints were aligned in some wacky ass way for a little while.
Yep.
There are innumerable things that I could think of where that might have been the case. And I think you did the right thing by, all right, let's just find the most minimal solution to what I'm doing that lets me keep going. And then you found that over time you've been able to start kind of changing and going back to let's call it a more minimalist experiment. So
what's the difference that somebody would experience? Like what do they not get when they go with a shoe that's got some padding, like more padding than your shoe, but less than say Hoka?
Well, they don't get that the research is pretty unequivocal that those things are worse for you than regular running shoes. And the reason why is because that little extra bit of padding is enough to mute the sensations you're getting from the ground and therefore mute the amount of feedback that you're getting and can respond to. And so it's not uncommon that people in a minimalist product that does that will still run as if they're in a regular running shoe, overstriding, heel striking, and not know that they're doing it. I've seen that repeatedly. In fact, I did some research with the former head of biomechanics from the U.S. Olympic Committee, and we brought a bunch of runners out, and we had them run barefoot in my sandals, in a pair of 5-finger shoes, and in their favorite shoe. And we found that their biomechanics when they were barefoot, even if they had never done it before, 90% of them were instantly better in various ways. We found that in our sandals, they were the same as when they were in barefoot. And we found some people who were very accomplished barefoot runners who also trained in 5-fingers, who when they put on their 5-finger shoes were overstriding and heel striking and didn't know they were doing it. That was the kicker. So,
because you would think when you look at 5 fingers, I mean, there's very minimal padding in a 5-finger, but it's enough.
Well, all I can say is just because something looks like a foot doesn't mean it acts like a foot. And ironically, when Vibram realized that people were using those shoes to run, the first running version they came out with, the Bikila, had way more padding than the original, like the KSO and the earlier models. And so they did the exact opposite of what people really needed. But there's this wacky thing where people think that cushioning is comfort. When you put on a running shoe in a running shoe store, they go, "How's that feel?" And if it feels cushy, people go, "Ooh, that's nice."
Yeah, right. Right.
A Tempur-Pedic don't is comfortable, but you don't want to do squat jumps on it.
Right.
And foam breaks down. This is another Phil Maffetone thing. Phil used to say the good news is, foam breaks down, and when it's broken down, it's probably when it's good for you because it's not providing anything extraneous. The problem is most running shoes are made so that by the time the foam breaks down, the rubber has worn out as well. So, oops. And like, here's an example. Adidas has made a lot of money in the last couple of years with their Boost foam technology because they show that a ball that bounces on the Boost foam bounces higher than on, quote, the other company's foam, which is foam that no other company uses. But I'm hoping to be at an event with them in the near future where they bring their Boost foam and bounce a ball off it. I'm going to take the ball and bounce it off a steel plate because it's going to bounce higher off a steel plate.
Yeah, right. Of course.
That is called physics, bitch.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So, and the other thing about foam is essentially tuned not to a particular speed and weight, and you are not that speed or weight most likely. So if you are, it's like a trampoline. If you're really, really heavy on a trampoline, you need different springs and a different bed than if you're really, really light, where you need different springs and a different bed than if you're really, really medium. And it's the same thing with foam, plus the fact that foam breaks down.
Well, it's funny because people, you're right. That's what goes through people's head. They want this squishy material, and there's some places in Santa Monica where you can go down near the beach where they've got this squishy. It's almost like a boardwalk, but they've turned it into a kind of a squishy material, and they think that is a better, more, it's a better place to run. It's easier on your, more gentle on your feet, and it's just not. It's just
No, the research is very clear on that. In fact, that was another Irene Davis piece. She took a look at Hoka's and other maximalist shoes and found that all that extra padding does not reduce the tibial acceleration and therefore loading forces on your body. So it doesn't do that. And just, again, let's just go back to evolution. Which do you think is going to be better at absorbing shock at different weights and different speeds and different angles? Some piece of foam or this entire mechanism that has done this for millions of years, called everything from your navel down.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. What have been some of your biggest challenges along this road? Because I know you were on Shark Tank a few years ago. Where have you had hurdles that were seemingly insurmountable that almost put you out of business or stopped you, or what have been some of those hurdles along the way?
Well, obviously nothing insurmountable, or
right.
we
wouldn't be talking. Right.
But the making things business is fraught with peril. And those guys who said, we would do this with you, but we're too smart to start a shoe company, they were smart.
They were smart. Right.
It is hard. Making things in general is hard. Making footwear is really hard. And the things that have been the biggest obstacle, frankly, has been money. We've been growing so quickly that we need to plow everything we can back into inventory. We've run out of inventory every year for the last couple of years. And the amount of cash that we need to really grow the company the way we want has been very hard to find because people, they don't understand this industry. They don't understand physical products. Banks want to give you financing based on last year, not based on next year. And so that's been a real challenge. We've gotten to a certain point with our revenue where people are being more, not aggressive, more accommodating, because we've sort of proven the concept by hitting the revenue marks that we've been hitting. But it's still, it's practically Lena's full-time job is finding money. And then after that, again, making things is hard. And it wouldn't matter if we were making things in our backyard or on the other side of the planet or on Mars. It's just not easy. There's human beings involved. And even when there's not human beings involved, things are not consistent. So for me personally, I want to make something where it's perfect on the first try. It's just not possible.
Right.
And so that's psychologically challenging for me. The other thing is just technology. I've been an internet marketer again since 1992, but a lot of things really haven't changed and they've gotten more complicated and not as good. And so there's to make a website that does everything that we want, that works perfectly. The line that I have about websites and shopping cart software is all shopping carts suck differently.
Right.
And so, even if you make your own software, it's going to have problems that you never anticipated. So the ongoing technical challenges are significant. Just the growth, frankly, has been now that I think of it, the biggest challenge. We just did a sale for the holidays, our Black Cyber Thanks Kwanzaa Saturniversary sale.
Yep.
And we did about 5 times the volume that we expected.
Wow.
And we there's literally no way we could have been prepared for that because we didn't expect it. And so we're still digging out from underneath that, and it ended 10 days ago. And that is really painful for me because we pride ourselves on providing exceptional customer service. And when we can't respond to an email within 24 hours, I find that just, oh God, man, I want to pull my eyes out and do something with them.
Right.
I don't know why pull your eyes out would be a thing, but I find it really
pull your
unpleasant.
hair out, pull your eyes out, pull your toes off, something.
Pull my hair out, poke my eyes out, stick my face through the wall. It's really, really unpleasant for me. I don't like when we're in that situation, and growth like this, it's really, really hard to manage, especially we're here in Colorado where the unemployment is the lowest in the country. So it's hard to find good people. Has that been a challenge also, finding the right people to be on the team? Always. Well, you ask anyone who runs any business and every one of them, or anyone who deals with the public in any way, and they go, God, this business would be so much better if we didn't have to deal with people. And so it's finding good talent. I mean, anyone in any business will tell you this. That's just a challenging thing. You're never going to find anyone who's willing to work as hard as we, the owners, will. Yeah. How big is your team now? 21. Has there ever been a point where you're like, this just isn't worth it, I need to just fold it in? No. No, look, I'm being only mildly glib when I say we want to change the world. I want to make natural movement as obvious as the idea of natural food and natural health. Not that I don't believe in, quote, Western medicine, but the way people think about food, unprocessed, clearly seems like a better idea than something that's just a giant list of chemicals. Yes. And people are getting the idea about wellness, that the extent to which you can do things naturally by sleeping better, by eating better, by getting out and exercising, by getting out in nature. We want natural movement to be just the obvious choice. And that's a long-term play. And so Irene Davis from Harvard said to me, if we could just get kids wearing your shoes, all the problems that we're currently treating adults for would be gone in 20 years. And I want to do that. This is a real thing. This is not one of the things that I love about our business and our company and our products and the people who are working with us. A lot of them are people who've been in business for a long time, and they go, what I love about what you're doing is it's real. So we don't have to hype anything. We just need to educate people. We just need to show them these simple examples of why what they've been, I'll say, brainwashed about for the last 45 years is exactly that. And it's not hard. Your feet are supposed to bend and move and flex and feel. What I say to people, I say, look, imagine the end of the day and you've just taken off your shoes. Do you feel better? If so, you've been wearing the wrong shoes. Right. Yeah, no, I find when I wear your shoes or shoes that give my feet room to kind of live, I a lot of times don't even really realize I'm wearing shoes. I mean, I'm wearing around the house. Yeah. I'm like, hey, I could take my shoes off, and there is no difference between. We've had people email us saying that they accidentally got into bed while still wearing their shoes. That's funny. That is funny. Awesome. It's funny. One of the things I really love about what you've done and to kind of aligning in that mission is you've made the shoes that you have now look like. Normal. Yeah, they look normal. They look you can wear them and not be called out as like some wacko zealot. Like kind of like the Five Fingers made people look, or maybe your sandals used to make people look. And it really allows like me as a dad, my kid's not going to go to school wearing a pair of Jesus sandals, or a pair of Five Fingers. I mean, he's going to look like a moron. But I could get him to wear your shoes for sure. Now, there are kids who disagree, and they're totally fine, and we're hip to that. We have families who, this is all they wear, and that works for me. Right. But yeah, we don't want to make things look either orthopedic or clownish. We don't want people to look at your shoes and think you just got out of a VW with 20 of your friends. Yeah, right. So, so that is part of our mission as well. At the same time, we're making things that have a unique and eye-catching look. Yep. So I don't know if you have had people stop you on the street and say, "What are those?" But that happens a lot.
I've had some people, there's a chiropractor I go to that have recognized my shoes or have said something to me about my shoes. I haven't had anybody stop me on the street.
Yeah. And and even just the being recognized thing, that's a very rare thing in footwear. The only other time we know of that is Crocs. And that was for a whole reason.
Right. Totally. What about barefoot running or your style shoes, barefoot running and sports? Basketball or soccer, or I know obviously with soccer you need cleats, or football you need cleats. But tell me, cause this is an area that literally just popped into my head and I hadn't really considered or thought about.
Yeah. So interesting. So you go to most third world countries and there's kids who are playing soccer really, really well and they've never worn shoes. The only reason you need cleats is if you're on a surface, so that you need cleats. And if it's a pitch that's gotten kind of wet, could come in handy.
Yep.
If it's well manicured and dry, not necessary.
Right.
So there is that. Cleats are made kind of like sprinting spikes, where I think they got the technology from Chinese foot binding, where they try to keep your foot like just a paddle at the end of your leg, and you don't really get to use it. I think there's a better way, and we're working on some things for doing that. Basketball, very interesting to us right now. Kobe Bryant did a video about how he worked with Nike to develop a more minimalist basketball shoe. It's a low top. It's kind of like the Nike Free, frankly, for basketball.
Okay.
It didn't go. What he was saying he wanted is not even close to what they ended up designing. It was much more of just a regular Nike shoe than what he described. We've built something that's what he described. And we're working right now to find some people who we want to test it. Because it keeps to our brand ethos, low to the ground for balance and agility, supports your foot laterally without getting in the way, wide enough for your toes to do their job. We think that there's reason to believe that it would reduce injuries like ankle sprains, where you twist your ankle. Like, think about any shoe that has a higher sole, or a sole that has like an edge on it. If you come down on that edge, your foot can go either way.
Yep.
If it goes down to normally landing, it's gone there kind of too fast, and you could jam up the bones in your foot and your ankle. If it goes the other way, you twist your ankle. And so without having an edge like that, we think that we can make something that works better. Similarly, without that padding, which always sucks energy out of you, we think that we can improve performance as well. And so we're in the process of doing some testing on that.
Is there a requirement? It's interesting that Kobe Bryant was working on a low top shoe. What about the idea that you need the ankle support from a high top shoe?
Again, most of the times you need ankle support because the shoe is making your ankle unstable. So we're not, the shoe that we're making is not going to be a low top, but it doesn't do the ankle support thing the way people think. It's a different kind of design. So I don't believe there's evidence that let's just go back. Let's go back to the original Converse All-Stars. I don't think that injury rates have gone down since that shoe. And that shoe was basically a minimalist shoe.
Well, and Converse All-Stars, they were canvas. They didn't really provide any ankle support. They just were, I don't even know, why were they high tops? Did they stay on your foot better? You couldn't get a flat, nobody could step on your...
I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is. I'll have to ask Dennis, our product designer, worked at Converse, not during that era, but he was there. I'll have to ask him if he knows the answer to that, because I don't know.
That's the only thing I can think. The functional thing, I think the most important thing that I can think of just on the top of my head is your shoe nobody could step on your foot and your shoe come off.
Yeah, it'll stay on your foot. Yeah, I think you might be right, but I don't know. I'll have to check into that.
Huh. That's really interesting. I literally hadn't thought of any of this stuff till right now.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. The shoe that we're making, like all of ours, will be like crazy light compared to other basketball shoes.
Right.
So it should be helpful.
Stephen, what do you do as an entrepreneur, as an athlete, as a husband, to keep yourself and keep your life in balance? Like to keep yourself on you obviously have a lot of energy and you're obviously on a mission, but how do you keep it all together? Do you have a ritual you follow? What is your morning ritual or evening ritual or?
Yeah, here's my ritual. I wake up, I start working, I go home, I eat something, I watch TV, I go to bed, I repeat.
Jesus Christ. You're the pillar of health.
Well, and then on Sundays I hit the track and I go out for brunch with my friends and I sigh a lot. I don't actually believe in this whole balance idea. I think that's frankly complete bullshit.
Okay.
What happens is there's sometimes you have more demands on one part of your life than others. Luckily, Lane and I don't have children, so that is not drawing our attention.
Right.
But at this point, and luckily I'm working with my wife who I adore and respect, and this wouldn't have happened without her. So, we share that.
Yep.
And that, and many couples have problems with that. It has been great for us. I mean, I could not be more grateful that I'm married to this wonderful woman. And so, so I don't believe in the balance idea. I think that's just patently false.
Well, how many years have you been going like this? I mean, you go hard.
Oh, well, the first few years, it was kind of a hobby business. So it didn't really kick in like this till about 4 years ago.
Okay.
But it's been nonstop for the last 4 years.
Wow.
We haven't had a vacation in 5. So it's been nonstop. Yeah, like almost 5 years.
When you say no vacation, you take days off. No days off.
Half a day on one day of the weekend. I'll like take half a day or 3/4 of a day off. I mean, sometimes I just fall down and don't get off the couch for a day. But as soon as I get up, I'll do a couple hours worth of email stuff or whatever's on my list.
Do you get sick very often? Do you find that it has a negative impact on any other, like biometric component of your health and well-being?
No.
Wow.
I don't get to train as much as I would like.
Right,
so
right.
That's unpleasant. I don't like that. I wasn't enjoying where my body fat percentage was. I just finished a 3.5-day potato hack where I ate nothing but potatoes of various kinds with barely any seasoning. In fact, for the first 2.5 days, I had no seasoning. And then I added a teaspoon of soy sauce into like 5 boiled potatoes. I was like, oh my God, that tastes so good. But that was fascinating. I dropped 5 pounds of body fat in 3.5 days.
Potatoes with no seasoning is pretty disgusting. Like no butter, no nothing, right? Just plain.
Well, I'm not a butter fan to begin with. So no, I had French fries for dinner every night. It was awesome. They were oven fries, but it was great. I had a good time.
Right.
So no, it's actually, someone described it well about the potato hack. It's like, you're genuinely hungry when you're craving a cold boiled potato.
Yeah, right.
And that did happen to me. It was fascinating. So I was terrified going into it, frankly, of the idea of, no seasoning, no nothing, but it was really fine.
Did you eat more cold potatoes or hot potatoes?
Cold.
From what I understand about cold potatoes, they don't have the same sort of carb load that they do. They don't affect your blood sugar the same way as they do as hot potatoes, which is a very strange concept.
Well, actually, it's once they've been heated and then cooled, the starches can reconfigure into a different chain that is referred to as resistant starch, and so the fiber content goes through the roof. And raw potatoes, same thing, but actually raw is not as good as cooked then cooled, and cooked then cooled is not as good as cooked, cooled a second time. But after that, you have diminishing returns. So it's very entertaining and did some really interesting things to my digestion as well. I'd rather not describe them.
Okay, I won't ask. But you're off of that now. You're how do you eat? What do you have a normal eating regimen that you follow?
No, I've been experimenting. Not really. I have a genetic thing where I don't taste the savory flavor of things. So meat has no interest for me because it has no flavor. Mm-hmm. And so I tend to be a high carb kind of guy to begin with. And lately I've been experimenting with being really deliberate about that and being like under 10% fat during the course of a day.
Wow.
And I like it. I think that's kind of how I'm wired. I don't know any sprinters who aren't very carb happy.
Right.
And I like high carb, low fat. It's if you read anything from Denise Minger, she's written some very interesting articles where she started out as a raw food vegan and nearly killed herself as a result, then became a kind of diehard carnivore, and the paleo community fell in love with her. And then she said, wait, let's take a look at this. Here's people who eat like literally nothing but sugar. The rice diet was all fruit juice and white sugar, and they cured themselves of diabetes and lost hundreds of pounds and didn't regain it. And so something's odd when that's going on. And then similarly, there's people who are on 90% fat diets who have amazing response as well. So she has this theory that when you're on either end of that spectrum, very high carb or very high fat, it initiates some biochemical or physiological changes that create some effects. And it can be a different effect for different people. One might respond to one and the other to the other. But so I'm experimenting with the high carb thing. And what I like about it is I look forward to meals. And sometimes my meal is just a giant bowl of low fat cereal with fat free milk. Oh my God, it makes me so happy.
Does quality come into play when in your choices?
It does. I mean, I'm just not eating candy bars or whatever it is.
Right.
I mean, there are people I know who are doing this experiment some are more and others less strict about whether it's whole food versus processed food. I just love having a bowl of cereal every day. It makes me extremely happy.
There's such a big element of emotion connected with food that, we always find, and we tell people, look, if you deprive yourself for long enough from a certain food, usually it doesn't end successfully or happily.
No, in fact, what I like to say is I'm on the I don't know when I'm going to get hit by a bus diet.
Right.
So if an opportunity shows up and there's a killer piece of chocolate cake in front of me, I'm going to eat that cake. And if I was on a high carb, low fat diet and that cake blows it, oh well. So yeah, I'm a big fan of not getting too stressed out about something that may or may not have an impact on the last years of your life if you get that far.
Sure, right. I get it. Do you find any other kind of well-being practices that find their way into your life, or you're just on the mission?
We bought an infrared sauna.
Oh, interesting.
I was never a sauna person growing up. When I was a kid, my first athletic thing, I was a springboard diver.
Yep.
And when I was I started, I guess, when I was 8 years old or 10, I can't remember. But I thought a sauna was the thing you went into to dry off of after you got out of the pool.
Yeah, right.
So I was never a fan. I'm in love with this thing.
Wow.
I really enjoy it.
Which kind of infrared sauna did you get?
I have no idea. It was, some off-brand, something I got on Craigslist.
Is it a big thing in the backyard, or is it like a portable, one of those portable ones?
It's actually a corner-shaped thing, so it's like triangular.
Okay.
So it seats 4 people if they're tiny and 2 people comfortably.
Uh-huh.
And we have it in a corner of our basement, and I love it. So we're in there a few times a week, and that's a really nice kind of whatever. I was a long-time meditator, but I don't find that how do I want to put it? I'll do that on occasion because I enjoy doing it, but I don't use it as a prophylactic or some sort of, or as a treatment for whatever.
Yep.
That I know. I'll tell you the one thing I do, to be totally candid. A year and 2 months ago, I had shoulder surgery, and I did not want to take all the opioids they gave me after surgery. And so since I'm living in Colorado, I had never done anything with marijuana. I went to a dispensary and got some indica gummy things. So indica versus sativa. Indica is supposed to be relaxing, and gummies because I don't want to smoke anything. I'm not interested in that.
Yep.
And so I took one. The first time I took one, I'm sitting there in a lot of pain from my shoulder. And after an hour, nothing. After 2 hours, nothing. And on the 3-hour mark, I just fell down. It was awesome. And so if I haven't been sleeping for 4 or 5 days in a row, or like 4 days in a row, because my mind is just going nonstop, then I'll do one of those just so I make sure I get a really good night's sleep.
That's really interesting. Yeah, no, I've heard of the benefits of that. I've never experimented with any sort of marijuana or any of those products myself. But
I hadn't either, and all it does is it just puts me to sleep. That's it.
Right.
I don't get high. I don't get anything, but it definitely makes sure that I'm down for the count for 8 hours.
What are your average hours of sleep per night when you're not doing that? 6?
Yeah.
6 hours. What are some of the problems, the main things that you're looking at facing today? Like where do you see the company going, and is the money
all the same?
The financial thing.
It's managing the growth. It's the financial management, the financial and personnel management of the growth. I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
So if people have listened to this podcast, obviously some people have listened to this podcast, what are some things you might recommend that they do, either other resources, other books, or other things that they might just experiment with without buying anything or without looking at anything?
Sure. Well, if they're entrepreneurs, I recommend getting a government job with a pension. And so that's my biggest recommendation. And for other human beings, take off your shoes. I mean, this is not, again, ain't rocket science. Take off your shoes, go for a walk, take off your, just find different surfaces and just see how it feels. Just use your feet again. And again, if something is unpleasant, then ask yourself, kind of have this mantra going off in your head. What can I do to make this easier, less effortful, and more fun? And then just experiment with how you're stepping, where you're placing your feet. Here's an experiment for when you're walking. Pretend you're speed skating, which what that means is use your foot, the foot that's planted on the ground, to push you forward, and don't reach out with your front foot. Just let it kind of hit the ground and then push you again. So there's different ways of playing with your gait that can use your body better or differently than you probably have been. And do that. Climb a tree. Anything that's from my perspective on the footwear side, just get out of your regular shoes and go experience the world. Try things that you think might be a little challenging. And if they are, stop, go home, recover, and then try again a few days later or a week later and you'll see how much things have changed. It's really, there's just no reason why. Oh, here's a fun one. Walk into stores barefoot. It's a really fun one. My favorite is the only store I've ever been hassled in is Whole Foods. I mean, this is a place where they yell at me because I'm not wearing shoes, but it's okay if you're breastfeeding a dog. It's just
That's insane. Right. Or bring your dog in. I was in Whole Foods the other day and there was a
bring
dog.
the dog with you. Why not?
Right.
But going through a grocery store barefoot or Home Depot barefoot, these are the smoothest surfaces you've ever been on. And the grocery store, the produce aisle is in the summer, the floors are really cold. They feel awesome. And restaurants will say you can't be in here barefoot because it's a health code thing. Yep. It is not. I'm not aware of any state in the union where it's a health code violation to be in a restaurant barefoot.
Really?
You don't need to get in an argument about it. I'm just letting you know. Yeah. I actually have a letter from the Secretary of State that says so. So I show restaurants that, and they go, well, then it's an insurance thing. It's like, no difference for if you're barefoot or in shoes from an insurance perspective. So
now, if somebody wants to get into some more of the nitty gritty, some of the more details of barefoot running and some of the techniques, where are places you'd send them to look? What videos, what books? Your website.
Yeah, zeroshoes.com, xeroshoes.com. Our YouTube channel, got a bunch of videos on there. Just go on YouTube and search for Barefoot Running. You'll find a lot of interesting stuff. Yeah,
because I mean, just to plug your website, I mean, you are not just the creator and purveyor of Zero Shoes. You're leading a movement, or you're part of the leader of a movement, and you're teaching and educating, and it's really phenomenal, the resources you have on your website.
Well, thank you. I will say with no humility whatsoever that I'm one of the handful of experts on this topic.
Yep. I would agree with that 100%. That's why you're here.
Well, thank you.
So I just want to thank you for being willing to chat with me and hang out for a podcast recording and tell your story and being so open and honest. And I love what you're up to, and I want to help move this, move the needle and get people out there running barefoot kind of the way you're leading the charge.
Well, again, it's all about natural, not necessarily even barefoot, but I want to thank you because this is just my favorite conversation, obviously. And this has been it's just a real treat. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks again, Stephen. And I look forward to catching up with you, and I'm sure I'm going to see you at a convention. And now I can't avoid you. Not that I've avoided you before, but now I know you. So
I look forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, man.
The Whole Life Podcast is produced by our podcast team, Winslow Jenkins, Becca Borowski, and Ernie Hurtado. You can find all of our episodes, links, and complete show notes at wholelifechallenge.com/podcast. The way that I've found is the best way to listen to podcasts is to subscribe so that episodes automatically get delivered right to your mobile device. You can do that in any podcast app on your phone. And hey, if you like the podcast, please do me a favor. Go to iTunes and give it a 5-star rating. And recommend it to your friends. I'm Andy Petronic, and thanks so much for listening.